Ladies and gentlemen, coming to you from the Colonial Dungeon, this is the Court Martial Podcast! Introducing your host for this evening, he has a bald spot on the top of his head, and he weighs in tonight at a number you don't need to know. He is the Colonial Loudmouth, Sean McCarty! And welcome! And the colonist means welcome to another great edition of the Court Martial Podcast. I am, as always, your Colonial Champion, Sean McCarty, and today, as per usual, we have a lot to talk about. But let me tell you something, brother. I got me a new guest. And I promised you a new guest. I am delivering on my new guest. He is the Shinsuke Nakamura to my AJ Styles, the Pentagon Jr. to my Ray Phoenix. He cuts the tension with a katana and snipes you down like an arrow to the 10 ring. He is the flash and dashing Korean assassin, Simon Lee. Welcome to the show.
What's up, guys?
Hello. It's great to have you here. Thank you for being on the podcast. We're going to talk a lot about what you know. I'm not going to make this podcast about me. This is going to be all about you, which is the great part about being on the first ever podcast. How do you feel? Excited?
Oh, yeah.
Sad? Forlorn?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for inviting me.
Hell yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And so we're going to start by, why don't you just start to tell us your wrestling background? Like when you got into wrestling, like who did you like, who did you not like, what has developed your tastes over the years? Just the mic is yours. Tell us a little bit about your wrestling experience.
Sure. So most of the wrestling I've watched consists of watching it with my dad.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I was in like in middle school, early high school-ish time. At the time, I lived in Korea, and then there was this two TV channels that showed me wrestling. Like one somewhat showed me like each episode, but then they would always show me episodes from like a year or two or sometimes a month ago, but not really up to date. So I never really had the consistent. I never was able to consistently check the time.
Oh, and like follow the storylines fully and stuff like that. Okay, yeah, no, I understand that.
And then the other channel, but actually that channel, the first channel, ended up getting taken down.
Oh, no snap. That's rough.
So, and then the second channel, it was this movie channel that showed me a bunch of other, like mostly Hollywood movies, but sometimes like this other movies, and then they would show me snippets of the episode, but at least some full matches.
Would it all be like WWE shows, or would there be like WCW or any other wrestling promotions that they would air?
Ah, yeah, good thing you brought that out. That was all WWE.
Oh, yeah.
I started watching it when it was the WWF.
Right.
And then they had the SmackDown and Raw, but I just watched both of them, not really knowing the difference, because I paid more attention to the WWE than the Raw. Or
how applicable is that to 2020? I couldn't tell which one was which. That is brilliant.
One was red and one was blue.
Yep, that's pretty much all we got. There are pay-per-views based around that notion itself. Basically, Survivor Series is like, even though we always cross-pollinate talent, here's the one night of the year when the red team goes up against the blue team, and for some reason that's important, but only at this month. And then the rest of it's just, and all our people are going to wear blue shirts, and all you people are going to wear red shirts. And it's basically just red versus blue WWE. And boy, how times have changed. The more things change, the more they stay the same. So this was like in the late 90s that you got in on it? Because you're saying like WWF.
No, it's because I was watching episodes from not necessarily the same year, but sometimes years ago.
Sure.
I think I started watching it like sometime in like early 2000s and stuff. So
who are some of the guys that you saw that you really liked?
I like the Rock, and then Hardy Boys.
Naturally.
And and then I would say I who else was there?
There's a lot of people in that era. I mean, if we're talking Attitude Era, we're talking Stone Cold Steve Austin, Triple H. Well, you may have despised him because he was the big old bad guy.
Oh, I thought it was pretty still awesome there.
Yeah, I mean that was the interesting thing about the Attitude Era is that even like the heels were still cool.
Yeah.
And that was the same thing with WCW when they did the NWO and the same kind of that the heels are cool. So that means they're not intimidated by the baby faces, and it was an interesting time as a wrestling fan. It just kind of followed the whole culture of the time.
Oh, speaking of the WCW, the ECW and WCW, I remember just watching like 2 episodes consisting of these snippets from the whole war between WWF or E versus the ECW when they had the whole big brawl.
Oh yeah.
I remembered watching it and thinking it was awesome. I wish they did more of that, or just I would like to see something.
It's interesting because we've seen a lot of cross-branded promotional like wars in the years since, and I don't, especially with TNA. TNA must have run like 6 or 7 storylines where it was TNA versus some other promotion coming in, and it just like after a while it didn't have the same flair to it. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm no lover of the invasion angle because they didn't wait until they got the proper stars like Hogan and the NWO and Goldberg and all those groups of people from WCW and Sting. They could have brought Sting in, but instead they went with the invasion storyline where it's like a bunch of new guys who were like nobody knew, and then everyone was like, oh, but see, it's a shame because there was a lot of potential there for that alliance storyline, but it's
so also, but then after I got into high school and like a sophomore years or around the time. That's like a year after that first channel I mentioned got taken down, and I just didn't have a whole lot of ways to look up and just watch wrestling.
Sure.
And from then on, I just took a long hiatus till like a couple of years ago, I would say. And then
would that say that would be concurrent with coming to know a particular colonial champion?
Yeah.
I wonder how that works.
But I gotta say, it's actually it was awesome to see someone just with enough deep knowledge talking about like something he has passion in.
Well, I appreciate the fact that you think that I have deep knowledge.
Or at least way deeper than mine.
Okay, all right, I appreciate that. I do appreciate that. And so as a result, we've been to, God, how many, like 4 or 5 Northeast Wrestling shows? I always bring up Northeast Wrestling. It's
I say about maybe 4. I don't think it's been 5 yet.
No, and who knows now? I mean, we had the thing, and we've seen a lot of different talent come and go through those.
Yeah.
Were you with me the time that we went to go when I saw the Hardys and the Young Bucks?
Hardys? No, I don't think so.
No, that was I guess that was before your time, but it was that was a great match that they had. I want to say 2014.
Oh yeah, that's probably why.
2014. When did we start doing it? 2016.
No, I think it was like
maybe 18, even later.
18 or 19.
Yeah, one of the first ones we went to see was Pentagon Jr.
Yeah,
because he was facing, I think, Sami Callihan. Remember?
Yeah,
do you remember that match? Yeah. Oh yeah, we got the shirts. That's right. Yeah, we're gonna have our superstar spotlight here later on in the show, but one of the people we're gonna talk about Pentagon Jr. a little bit later. But that was one of the first people. Would you say that you kind of got to see live?
Oh yeah. And then before going there, I looked up like who was appearing in the whole night, and then I saw Pentagon Jr. and I was really excited about that.
See, that's where the draw comes in. We'll talk about why Pentagon got really such high acclaim here in a minute. But it's but explain your experience going through a wrestling show, going through a live wrestling show, because I always like finding out what people take out of going to a live show, because it's different with everybody.
Oh yeah, so the first time I went there, I gotta say I didn't expect it to be that much of a smaller show.
Yeah, that one didn't really draw as much as I expected it to.
Like when I have wrestling, I still have the WWE with the huge packed stadium in my mind.
Yeah.
So, but it didn't take me out of the whole experience or anything. It's just saying that I was just very surprised to find that out.
And sometimes smaller arenas are kind of nice, especially when they don't fill up, because you kind of get a lot of room. You know, you got to get to either stand or sit where you want, and you get some space. I mean, you can still talk to people if you want to, but...
No, I really like that size just enough to fill up that whole high school the gym.
Yeah, and we went to a couple shows. I think it was the ones... Was it the one that was during Royal Rumble weekend that we did over the top that was pretty much packed and we were doing standing room only? I think it was the only time we never found a seat.
I think even on that one we ended up getting the seat.
We might have. I remember standing up for the end piece of it. Just for when... and that was when Man Scout Jake Manning won the wire-to-wire over-the-top Battle Royal to get his first Northeast Wrestling win in 12 years. And you kind of had to be there to understand it. That's the only way I can put it. It was actually... I love everything that Northeast Wrestling does. I'm not trying to cut a plug on them again, but they really are... and I hope that they're actually able to survive this whole thing.
Oh, yeah, I hope
with the crisis. I mean, it seems like they're trying. And they've been around for, I think, 25 years, actually.
Like, what have they been doing lately? Because I really like them, too.
They've been promoting... they've been trying to hype shows. It's been harder to find venues because how many people will be allowed in and what kind of spacing they take, and they got to be careful, legally with things like that. I don't know the logistics. All I know is that it's got to be difficult as a promoter to actually find a venue that people feel comfortable not only performing in, but also having decent amount of spectators in whatever kind of space it in. They're probably looking for outdoor venues.
I haven't, just a suggestion, but I think they should have just like the drive-in theaters. They should have some kind of drive-in stadium.
That'd be kind of cool. That actually would be really cool. If you see, maybe have just like the cars like all around, but you imagine the exhaust and the wrestlers trying to breathe, where there's like all this car exhaust. So you'd have to make an order that you have to shut off your car.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd have to do that because the only reason that I say that is that at Hog Wild WCW, that was when they had a wrestling a wrestling pay-per-view at like the Sturgis Motorcycle Rally, and the entire ring was surrounded by motorcycles all revving their engines, going hey, 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 hey. And I'm like, that had in the middle of August, so that had to have been absolutely brutal, and it was a decent idea, but I don't think it really boiled down in execution, but. Speaking of things that did, I want to talk about Lucha Underground, because that was really kind of what sparked, I think, us going to those shows.
Yeah,
Talk a little bit about what you got out of Lucha Underground for a brief minute.
So it was like the first wrestling show in like almost 10 or something years that I had an access to because I just found it on the Netflix.
Yeah, that was back when it was on Netflix.
And then I don't know if it's a normal thing, but also I just thought the idea of having the season and episodes and the season finale I thought it was a pretty interesting idea.
Yeah, it was definitely a change. It's the thing that I cannot fault them for in any respect is choosing a different format to present pro wrestling. And the thing is about it is like it never was trying to pass off that it was legitimate competition. You know what I mean? Like it was never trying to be like, okay, we're trying to fight to be the champion, but it was basically a story that used pro wrestling to tell it. You know, it was a TV show framed with wrestling rather than a pro wrestling show that used as entertainment to try and pass off it as legitimate competition.
That's a good point because I just took it as a means to watch wrestling.
Sure.
And then just didn't really appreciate all those cinematic cutscenes in the middle.
Well, and it's funny because like that's one of the things when you hear about the major old school lines of thinking. They're like, oh, well, all these cutscenes and things like that, take you out of the moment. They're trying to pass off this as a legitimate wrestling promotion, and you're trying to, present it as a sport rather than as entertainment. But Lucha Underground never shied away from that. But that being said, everyone who was on that show still took their role seriously enough to where you believed they all wanted to compete for the big prize because the world title meant control. So there was still like that pyramid to get to the top, and everyone felt motivated to do that. So it still felt, there was still an air of legitimacy feel, even though you knew it was just a TV show.
Oh yeah,
does that make sense?
I gotta say, those episodes that were on Netflix were just good wrestling to begin with. I just recently started watching it again, but then it's starting from the season 3.
Right.
And then so far it isn't bad or anything. It's just that I remember watching season 1 and 2 and being more impressed.
Yeah, I definitely think they got a little hokier with the cutscenes in season 3. Season 2 they did some hokey stuff, but it wasn't like overbearing. Season 3 they kind of went to the wall with that. and it's not a bad thing. Well, in a way it is a bad thing. But I also thought that in season 3 their booking suffered. That it just wasn't as clean a storytelling as I would have liked. For example, and I know this is going to be one of those unpopular opinion things, because you know how they promoted themselves as equal opportunity, like Masquerita Sagrada was still able to face Big Rick, and the females could face the males, and everybody got to do
like Sexy Star faced Matanza.
Yeah, like the Mortal Kombat type of thing. Well, and that's kind of what I'm talking about. When they made Sexy Star, I don't know if you've gotten this far. I don't mean to spoil it for you.
It's all right. You can just.
But
I'm just gonna watch
they
it
made
anyway.
Sexy Star the world champion.
Oh, they did.
But the person she beat was Mil Muertes.
They had the match before. It's like, I guess it's like a revenge match.
Yeah, to me, Mil Muertes was the big dominating monster that was only succeeded by Matanza. But at the same time, I just didn't feel like a man of that stature who they were building in a way that was making him seem like one of the most indomitable beings in the show. To have her beat him, I didn't agree with. I'm all for Sexy Star being world champion in that promotion, but I didn't feel like who she pinned and had the circumstances around it were that good. And that's not reflective of Sexy Star as a person, because she has been known to do some less than favorable things. I'm just going to leave it at that.
See, I don't know about these things because I just watched wrestling.
Like for example, she tried to during a match, like a Fatal 4-Way. There's this woman, Rosemary, and she basically lynched in an armbar and then started taking liberties and actually really stretched out her arm for no reason. And there's many things she said things that people got upset about, and she's got kind of a track record. I don't want to say that in a negative way, but I mean she's got a track record. And but I'm speaking objectively about that particular how they did it.
But so watching the Sexy Star versus Mil Muertes, you didn't feel like the match was convincing?
Well, the thing was, I think it was the 20-person battle royal that they did. She won the battle royal to become the world's champion. I forget the name of that battle royal, but it's the 20-person battle royal that's got. Since some Lucha Underground fan, we are. They had a name for it. I just forget the name for it.
Aztec Warfare? Is it Aztec Warfare?
It might have been Aztec Warfare. I think it was. I hope it was. Somebody let us know in the comments whether we're just talking out our ass or if we actually halfway know what we're talking about. Anyway, another thing I liked about Lucha Underground, I thought the Gift of the Gods Championship was clever.
That was great.
I thought that was a really good idea. It was just something different that was, you could use it to cash in at any time, but you still had to have 7 people compete in a thing. And I'm usually not a big fan of having all multi-man matches all the time, but that's credit to Lucha's booking because, you only got 3 or 4 matches a show. So you had to cycle all the talent, and in cycling all the talent, nobody got stale. You didn't get sick of seeing anybody on Lucha Underground.
Oh, and just going back to the first point of them being the equal opportunists. I enjoy the Pentagon versus the Black Lotus Triad.
Yeah, that was a surprisingly entertaining one, and that match had Kairi Sane in it for the WWE current watchers.
Which one was she?
Kairi Sane is the one who had the really sick elbow drop, and she. In current professional wrestling, she wears a pirate hat and spins a little pirate wheel, and she's like, ha ha ha, I'm Kairi Sane, ha ha ha. No, that's not a good impression. whatsoever. I actually feel bad for Kairi Sane.
Again, it's mostly because I don't really know much about wrestling. I recently started catching up.
Right.
So yeah.
Well, if you watch that match again though, that Triads versus Pentagon, it's the one who does. I think it's the one in the middle, the second Triad who does the big swooping elbow. I think she actually pins Pentagon. I think, if I recall correctly, I think she actually did.
So the third girl is the one that pins her, and then the fourth one, who's supposedly the leader of the Black Lotus Triad, comes out and breaks his arm.
Right. There was a lot of arm breakage. There was a lot of arm breakage in Lucha Underground, but it really did make Pentagon a star. You know, it really showcased him the right way, and I also think that a great figure for like a centralizing figure as far as the cutscenes go. I thought Dario Cueto was a wonderful general manager and general like owner of the show.
Yeah.
As far as what he contributed and the way that he managed things, it was fair, but it was seductive, and there was always sinister intentions behind what he was doing. He was just as important to Lucha Underground's success as any of the actual wrestlers.
Yeah, actually, I enjoyed having him on the screen. Like he would be the general manager, and he sometimes would be just try to come behind the referees and fuck with them just a little. And he just did that all, and when he introduces the idea of the gift of the gods, or just like the Dario wheel for the championship match. Yeah,
he was a great tool as a framing device to kind of bring the whole show together, and it was not as bad as far as the cutscenes concerned, because they were at least still talking about match potentials and things like that, as opposed to in season 3 when Brian Cage got the glove and then just like went to the officer and killed the officer with the glove because he was like I know you haven't gotten this far. I'm spoiling the shit out of this for you, but like it got ridiculous like that. Like the cutscenes became more and more like ridiculous, as opposed to it being used as the framing device to explain why these two people are mad at each other and why they kind of strayed from that to get more into the entertainment base of it. And I don't know much about the financials of why it closed after 4 seasons. I think it had something to do with the network. I'm not totally positive, but
so what is Dario Cueto doing these days, anyways?
I looked him up on IMDb. He's actually an actor that does a lot of stuff with Mexican television, and he just happened to be chosen for that role. But he did it beautifully. I mean, he really executed it well. And, I don't want to spoil season 3 into season 4. Season 4 is where it got, like, really over the top hokey for me, where I was like, I can't really do this anymore.
You said there was this time travel at one point.
Yeah, there's it gets a little nuts, but for what it's worth, though, Lucha Underground does deserve recognition for changing the format completely of how wrestling could be done and making it believable and exciting and a fun watch. A really fun watch.
It is, yeah.
And so with that said, speaking of fun watches, it means that we're on the second half of our show, and you know what that means.
What time is it? It's the fight, it's the brawl, it's the match of the week. It's tonight, watch along with the son of a beat. It's one fall, the down for the 1, 2, and 3. So don't stall, hang on to the edge of your seat. We got a punch and a flip and a powerbomb too. All the moves and the stars are all under review. See the baby face cheered and the heels get heat. This is wrestling at its peak. It's the match of the week.
That is right, everybody. It is our match of the week. I am very excited to talk about this match. You and I actually just watched this right before we got on the air. Mm-hmm. And it is Shawn Michaels defending his World Heavyweight Championship on Raw against Rob Van Dam on the November 25th, 2002 edition of Monday Night Raw. Initial impressions of this match.
I enjoyed it, and then for the lack of a better way to explain it, just like you just jokingly said good old times, but yeah, like I kind of see what that's about. Like it just looks more believable, and it just looks more enjoyable. And then the Triple H at the end, Did I say it a little too early?
Well, we are going to get to Triple H because I want to kind of go through this match and give our reactions to that too. But it's okay. You didn't spoil the finish because presumably our loyal and faithful fans will have watched this match prior to having this conversation. So they will know what we're talking about. But if you don't, you can always go back. The link to this week's Match of the Week can either be found in the video last week or in the video this week. Look in the description. You will find it. It is Shawn Michaels, Rob Van Dam. It's on YouTube. Easy click, easy watch. I like promoting other channels when I get nothing else in return. But it's great matches, and we have to have a segment. So that's why we are doing what we're doing. Shawn Michaels still has a bob haircut because he, at least he wasn't wearing poo brown pants like he was at Survivor Series. But Shawn comes in, Rob comes in. This is a babyface versus babyface match, which doesn't happen very often when talking about 2000s era WWE.
Did they ever have heel versus heel?
Yes, they did.
And then just two of them pulling the dirty tricks on each other,
well,
like little tricks.
It's harder to pull. It's harder to pull off because, because people want somebody to cheer. So one person is inevitably going to have to start doing a little bit more babyface stuff. So like a heel versus heel sometimes is good to get somebody over as a babyface or kind of test the waters to them turning babyface. But you don't see it as often as others. But there is a great heel versus heel match. Shawn Michaels versus Rick Martel, I believe it was. Rick the Model Martel from 1994, I want to say. Maybe 1995. Could be even earlier. But it's a good heel versus heel match. It doesn't work very often, but it did in that instance. And but anyway, back to this match. So they go in a lockup, they do a bunch of chain wrestling, and then they do the double pull-up, where they're both laying on the mat and one of them's got over. They do the two count, and then they both pull up their legs and flip around and over. I was told by the one Jim Cornette that was one of Ric Flair's favorite spots. And there were several homages to Flair in this particular match, as we came to find.
What's the third one?
Well, there were at least two, and there was this and the figure four, which came later. Right. And I mean, Shawn working Rob's leg, I suppose, but he wasn't doing the exact same moves that Flair normally does. But they did the double pull apart. And then Van Dam throws Michaels over the top, and Michaels takes a ridiculously oversold bump because it's just.
Oh yeah.
And that's why we love Shawn, though. I mean, have you ever seen the Shawn Michaels versus Hulk Hogan match from 2005, where Shawn just bounces around like literally like a chicken with his head cut off?
I don't think I have. But
oh man! All right, that might end up, if I can find that on YouTube, that might end up being the match of the week. For this, we're going to do it on the live stream, which by the way, just taking a subtle moment. This coming week, we are going to have week 2 of our Battle of the Brands, National Wrestling League versus Atlantic Coast Pro Wrestling. Stay tuned for that. We will also on Tuesday have a live stream, and that will be fun. And it might be Hogan Michaels, it might be something else. I haven't decided yet, but you will find out, and the link will be in the description right down below. So then Rob Van Dam goes for an assigned moonsault, and Shawn Michaels just does not catch him. He sticks one arm out and then just lets Van Dam fall.
Oh yeah, that is right after you said right after he had the back surgery, so that might have been just the best option for him without.
Well, who knows? I'm not saying that Shawn was trying to stiff Van Dam at all or something. I don't know if he just. I don't know. I couldn't tell you what happened. Maybe just Shawn wasn't in the right position, but I found that hard to believe, given that it's Shawn freaking Michaels. But I don't know. But Van Dam did it just fine because he still landed on his feet, which he had an innate ability to do. To just he had cat-like reflexes when it came to doing some of those jumps and moves that he does. It's one of those things that made Rob Van Dam so great to watch. And when you think about this match, Shawn Michaels versus Rob Van Dam, you never really saw it after this, I don't think. I think this might be the only time that these two have ever faced each other, which makes it something of a dream match, and it's kind of a shame we didn't get more of a program between these two. Shawn Michaels worked heel just enough to get sympathy for Van Dam, to get cheers for him, but he didn't ever break the rules. So it was nice to actually see the babyface dynamic work while Shawn was still just giving just enough give to make Rob the more sympathetic character of the two, just as champion's advantage, if you will. The figure 4 leg lock is still, even from Shawn Michaels, still looks better than the Miz's. Miz, just stop it. Stop it. I don't care if Flair endorsed you. Stop it. Just you're having a bad time. You're having a bad time. Have you ever seen the Miz's figure 4?
I did not know he even did it.
Yeah, exactly. See? Exactly my point. Exactly my goddamn point. Boom. Stop it. That's enough. I'm calling it right now. It's time to stop. It's time to stop. Anyway.
Does he just look really bad?
It just looks really weak. It just looks like he doesn't even try to cinch it in, and it just looks ineffective. And I like the Miz. I'm not even trying to knock the Miz. I'm just knocking that particular move because it looks awful. And then there was a great comeback. Referee Earl Ebner got nearly trampled when Van Dam did the crossbody, and they went for the pin, and Ebner was rolling underneath, and he had to like scramble to get out of there.
You know, I think it's awesome when the referees really sell the reaction. Like they just get hit by so like a spear or whatever by mistake, and they just act like their head got chopped off, and then it just makes me enjoy it.
It does help. I also like referees that actually enforce the rules to some description, because it makes it a lot easier to tell stories when distracting the referee is part of the finish, which it wasn't on this particular match. But it's just, it's kind of the reacting to the moves is just as important as you actually enforcing the rules. And that's one of the things I don't like about AEW's tag matches and the tag matches that we saw in Northeast Wrestling of late, the more recent ones.
Which one?
Were the ones that we saw in the most when we went in January of this year, where it was just like the referee didn't like enforce any tags. Everyone was just in the ring at the same time. They were all just doing gymnastics moves to each other. And it didn't have the structure of somebody, getting clean tags and distracting the referee. And tag team wrestling is going to be revitalized, I hope, if we get the right people on it. But it's... Anyway. Then a massive DDT from Shawn Michaels. What a sell from Van Dam. Looked like he planted him face first and really got him down. Then Shawn Michaels went for the super kick. Then we see the 5-star frog splash. And then Jerry Lawler throughout the whole match. I love this. When Shawn Michaels hits the elbow and Jerry's like, I knew Shawn Michaels would win. And then it's countered by Van Dam and he goes up. He's like, I knew Van Dam was going to win. I told you. I knew it. That is classic Jerry Lawler. That is the Jerry Lawler that I've come to know to love. For as much of a sentence as that was.
Well, you can't be wrong if you bet on both sides.
Exactly. See, Jerry knows. Jerry knows what's up. Then Triple H comes in because, of course, this was in the middle of the Triple H Shawn Michaels Bitter Blood feud, which was, I would argue, the best rivalry of all time, because it's what got me into wrestling. Because in the unsanctioned match between Triple H and Shawn Michaels at a SummerSlam 2002 was the time when I was just like, yep, I'm doing this forever. And that is kind of what's led to this moment. So you have those two to thank. So Triple H goes in and hits Rob Van Dam, and obviously that's a disqualification. Goes and beats down Rob, but doesn't really give a toss about Rob. He's trying to hit Michaels. Hits Rob with a pedigree, then does the backbreaker on the chair to Shawn Michaels. For the love of God is back. Somebody help us. What did you think about this finish?
What is it? You earlier said that it was the only match between Shawn Michaels and Rob Van Dam, and that in that sense they deserved a better finish.
That's fair.
As the match between them, but then but in the aspect of Triple H versus the Shawn Michaels, I thought it was a great movie as well. And then earlier you asked like what wrestlers I liked. Like I didn't like hate Triple H. I mean, sure, like maybe for some people who watch it and then who really get into the babyface versus heel.
Yeah.
But I just always appreciated him as this like vicious looking guy who just comes in to fuck shit up.
And he wasn't like that at the start. I got to give full on credit to Triple H.
Really? He wasn't.
No, he really he was first. He was first this blue blood Connecticut aristocrat who was like, I'm better than everybody else, and I've been told I'm the best. And then he just gets the piss beaten out of him, and then joins DX with Shawn Michaels, and then then Shawn Michaels gets hurt and leaves, and now Triple H has to take the ball and run with it, and then he became the big tyrannical Kingslayer man that we've come to know, the King of Kings, that we've come to know today, who's running NXT and doing great things for the future of pro wrestling. But I thought this match was fun. And I agree that if I wish that we had gotten an opportunity to see an actual program between between Shawn Michaels and Rob Van Dam. It just never materialized because this was obviously Triple H and Shawn. This was on the way to their 3 Stages of Hell match at Armageddon. So this was in the middle of their feud. But I feel like if they had gotten Van Dam and Michaels in the same place at the same time, they could have had a great program. The problem is, who do you make heel? And I would think it'd have to be Shawn.
See, I still am not that familiar with the idea of heel and babyface.
Well, heel's just people who are dicks.
That I know, but then what I'm saying is that for a match, does there have to be either side? Can it be
not necessarily? I would say not necessarily. There's certain times that it works, but I think there's also a great majority of times that matches nowadays need somebody to be good and somebody to be bad to actually tell the story properly. Because you feel more invested in the matches when you've got somebody to cheer for and you've got somebody who you don't want to win. Even if it's just suspending the disbelief for the moment of the match, you still like seeing one person get the comeback or one person rising above the oppression of the beatdown that they've suffered at the hands of the other guy. So even though if you do a babyface versus babyface match, you still have to, and Shawn doing this in this match was a really good example of this. Mm-hmm. You can still do some heelish stuff, like getting particularly vicious when working the leg or doing really painful submissions and stuff like that. So, Shawn healed it up just enough to make people cheer Van Dam. So Van Dam ended up making the comeback. And that caused people to cheer Van Dam more. It's not that they weren't cheering for Shawn, it's just they were still cheering for Van Dam. It works if you have the right people who know how to do the right things in the right moments. I don't think people nowadays have that same innate ability without having a heel and a babyface, if that makes sense. So, and it's what I've also attributed to why I sometimes feel empty watching pro wrestling shows. Because there's not enough people doing heel and babyface work that's actually meaningful heel and babyface work. That you can clearly identify who's the heel and who's the babyface and who, and I think that level of emotional detachment hurts shows as a whole. And I've noticed that with a couple of the NEW shows, particularly of recently, like the last one we went to. Mm-hmm. Like, while it was fine, there was nothing necessarily wrong with the show. I remember you and I both driving out of there feeling just a little, deflated.
Yeah, the last couple of them weren't as good as the couple of ones before that. Mm-hmm.
That's all because of Man Scout Jake Manning. We'll have to have a Superstar Spotlight on at some point. But speaking of a Superstar Spotlight, and now maybe I have to do an intro for Superstar Spotlight, now that I'm thinking about it. So we're going to have to, but I'm going to tease it to the fans. I'm going to tease it to the fans because last time I promised Match of the Week intro for 2 months, and it didn't happen, and then it happened. Same deal. I'm not going to tell you when it's going to be done, but it will be done at some point. And that is how it's going to go down. But our Superstar Spotlight this week, we talked about him a little bit at the very beginning of the show. We talked about him in the second quarter of the show. We talked about him a little bit even with this Shawn Michaels and Van Dam bit. It is Pentagon Jr., currently a tag team with Rey Fenix on AEW. Pentagon I'm a huge fan, first of all, of Pentagon Jr. I like his solo work better than I like his tag team work. And it's just because, they do a lot of the lucha stuff, but I feel like they sometimes are a little too fast for American wrestling tag teams. And it just and you don't get as much of the personality of Pentagon when he's teaming up with his brother.
Yeah, and then the reason I like about Pentagon is that when he does whatever the moves, like he really expresses his intent very well.
Yes,
like he
absolutely.
goes to chop delivers the low kick, and I mean that you know that like he's not really kicking it, but just if you're not just if you're just watching it at a glance and you go like, holy shit!
Yeah, it looks crisp.
Yeah,
it looks real crisp. I mean, it's something, and Pentagon's really, we were talking about Lucha Underground. I don't think anybody was helped more than Pentagon Jr. in Lucha Underground as far as their wrestling career. You could make the argument of Ricochet because he did join WWE after he had done his Prince Puma thing, but I think
Prince Puma.
Yes, same dude.
Whoa!
I've kept that kayfabe to him for so long, and just now I have broken it for him. So I'm sorry I've spoiled the kayfabe. But yes, now we know. This is groundbreaking court martial podcast. We are hearing some dead leveling stunners, spoilers, and now you know, folks at home. But Pentagon Jr. I mean, he was presented. You know, it wasn't about his size, but it was about his demeanor.
Yeah.
And the way that, you know, his intensity when he cut promos, which I loved in Spanish. I love when they allow luchadors to speak their native tongue, because they can spit actual intent and feeling behind it better than they can when they're trying to speak English.
Okay.
Alberto El Patron, as again, we're not going to talk about his nefarious deeds. But one credit, I'm not even going to bring it up. Look it up on the internet.
All right.
Look it up on the internet. I'm not going there. I'm not going there. But,
oh my God, it's like half the people I know
have
done
but
something.
Alberto El Patron, yeah, you know what? It's been a hell of a 3 weeks. It's been a hell of a 3 weeks, Simon. This is all, yeah. It's been a hell of a 3 weeks.
It's like I time traveled.
You busted like, what the hell happened here? Yeah. But anyway, that's one thing that I will give Alberto El Patron. I always liked his Spanish promos better than his English promos. He had more intensity in him. You could feel his conviction where you couldn't do that in English. And I'm not knocking him, the wrestler. I'm just saying it was, and I feel like Pentagon was the same way. You know, you didn't even necessarily need to understand what he was saying to get the intent in his eyes and see and hear the drive, and that's what kind of got everyone doing the Cero Miedo, and that was, you know, and that was also brilliant for him having that. And you know, there's a lot of Pentagon matches that I've always enjoyed. What are some of the ones that you can remember that you've liked?
Well, I think I mentioned it earlier. Him versus the Black Lotus Triad.
Yep.
I really liked that one. And which one was that? I think it was. This one was this.
Well, there was quite a few of them that in Lucha Underground. That is. I mean, he also had some success in Impact too, but we mostly know him. At least I do from Lucha Underground and the times we've seen him live.
I just. It's not that his matches didn't stand out. It's just that I cannot remember on top of.
It's because they were all so immaculately fantastic that we can't. No, it's and not for nothing. I really do like what Pentagon does, and I like what he brings to the table. I just wish that he was able to exhibit more of his personality as a singles wrestler on a more mainstream American show. I mean, I'm not saying AEW isn't, but they're using him as a tag team, and I don't think he's his Sting. And you're also taking away, for what it's worth, from Rey Fenix, who I also think is better on his own.
I can't even imagine Pentagon as the tag team.
Yeah, see, well, that's something that
I haven't watched them as the tag team.
Yeah,
and
that's like what Lucha Underground did, is that they made both of those guys look and feel so important on their own. You know, and made their own. They made these individuals shine, and they really did make stars. All, you know, for those who are like in the wrestling community, but it did open doors for a lot of people.
Yeah. And
I really did. And Pentagon, his stuff when he did his match with Vampiro, which was super intense.
Oh yeah, that was it.
What's interesting about that is Lucha Underground did make a lot of edits and cuts But you never, we were talking about this before the show, you never felt that. You never felt like they were making cuts. It still felt very live action.
Yeah.
So, like, it's amazing, actually, the kind of editing they did to make those matches look and feel even more smooth than maybe they even were full-fledged at the time.
The 14 minutes you said, like, that felt like the, like, first time watching it, I thought it was like, oh, wow, it's actually... I thought it was it's shorter compared to other matches, but now I'm thinking about it, it's just like a good length of match.
Yeah, and sometimes what that gets rid of is just some of that downtime.
Yeah.
You know, where people, there's a lot of things that people can do, like when they're trying to, like, milk it for, like, pandering to the crowd or things like that, or when they, you know, to do heel and babyface stuff, you know, that's one thing. So it wasn't just all moves on moves on moves. Like, you still got the important parts of the match so that the story remained being told throughout the whole thing, but it wasn't like certain parts dragged on, so you never really got bored of what you were watching. And Pentagon was one of those people who, you know, his moves were flashy, but he also knew how to slow it down and really get punches and take some grit.
Like, compared to some other luchadors in the Lucha Underground, these moves didn't feel like just almost like effortless, and the cheap counter moves, and he could do like high flyers. He could do just some grappling submissions. He can do lift, like suplex, lift and toss, and then he does like kicks and strikes as well. Yeah,
he's great, and the arm breaking stuff. I mean that was so huge in getting him over as somebody to really be reckoned with. And then to have him be beaten down, you know, when he had the whole thing with him and Muertes.
Yeah.
And I think it was him and Matanza also had another thing where he had his back broken and Vampiro was nursing him back to health. And there was a whole mess of stuff that Pentagon did in Lucha Underground that really boosted his profile to the point where he became Impact World Heavyweight Champion, which was his first real insertion into American wrestling. And now he is on national television on TNT with AEW. I just wish they presented him better. But Pentagon is, at least for my money, one of my favorite more modern wrestlers and modern style wrestlers that there is out there.
Yeah, I agree. Like he's the relatively the newer generation for wrestler for me that I just instantly recognize.
Yeah.
Even from like a first or second episode of the Lucha Underground, whichever one that he first came out.
Right.
Like
he's always had a good look.
Yeah,
he was always very
looked
identified.
really vicious. Like he looked awesome, and just good to watch him on the screen.
Yeah.
And just even in the person as well.
He was a cool guy when we actually went up to meet him. We were able to talk to him.
I like the match. I really enjoyed the match with Sami Callihan.
Yeah.
Like that wasn't the one with the Lucha Underground. That's also the one that stood out to me.
Right, yeah. Well, we saw a match. We were talking about it before, about Penta and Sami Callihan, and I think it was like a street fight, maybe.
Wait,
I feel like because I remember, didn't they have like the chair and they used the trash can?
That yes.
And it's and
they call it street fight.
I think it was a street fight. It was something like that. It was pretty fun. And then at the end of the show, you know, everyone, you know, Pentagon set up his whole thing, and then I know I got a shirt. I think, did you get a mask? And then we all got a photo. So it's good stuff. I'll post the photo. It was a good time. Pentagon Jr. is a good dude.
But speaking of the street fight, like, I don't know why the WWE or WWE got rid of their hardcore matches.
They didn't. They just made them way more sterile. There's no more blood. It's just a whole bunch of everything's just set up for them. So there's no like, let's see what's around the ring.
Like, I don't have to watch like people getting cutting their foreheads or stuff. But then at least I would like to see some aspects of the hardcore match.
Yeah, there's just not a whole lot of intensity behind it anymore, in my personal opinion. Or either that, or it's way too graphic. There's no middle ground because a jillion of people have done it. So now all of the purpose behind it is like nil, because people have just you can go online and find footage of people getting their heads cut with a sawzall in the middle of the ring, or just a steel chair putting a inch spike into someone's skull, and that's part of the reason why wrestling's reputation is such garbage. But there used to be times when it was done well and it was done properly, and now it's just too sterile.
Oh, actually, just
it's safe, which is good, but it's too sterile and it looks contrived.
But on top of one more thing I like about the hardcore matches, aside from the using weapons and stuff, is that pins count anywhere, anytime.
That's always a fun one.
Something like that I would like to watch again.
Yeah, and again, it's all circumstantial. Lucha Underground, I think they did it right.
They did?
I think they did. Well, you
did.
remember that match between Brian Cage and Mac?
Oh, yeah.
Where they did that one where it was like the curb stomp into the cinder block was the end of the match, and it was up on like the ramp.
Yeah, I really liked that.
That was insane. If you have not watched that match, try to find that online. That's a very fun match to watch.
Is that on the season 2?
I think it was season 1. I think that was on Ultima Lucha, season 1. That was, but we've really been pushing Lucha Underground. But it's that time, unfortunately, and it's been so much fun. But it's time for our first commercial break. First of all, Simon, thank you so much for being on the show. I hope to have you back at some time soon.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. I would love to be back here.
Hell yeah. And now with that said, remember, folks, next week is the Battle of the Brands, NWL, ACPW. We will see you at the live stream. With that said, we will be right back after these